Hey guys, welcome back. This is going to be part 3 of the AEQX hopper car project. We're going to go ahead and get right into this. So far where we left off, we had most of the roof techniques done, and we're ready to start doing the rust and everything else on the top and on the sides. So we'll go ahead and get right into that. So now we can actually start the weathering process, and I like to start by doing the washes. In this case I'm going to be using mostly oil washes on this, not so much acrylic. We will be doing some acrylic detail work later on the car body sides, but for now we're going to start with the washes on the underbody. I'm using my Winsor & Newton. This is the burnt umber color. This is a great color to do a lot of these wash effects with. The water mixable oils just dilute very nicely and they just apply really well. I'm going to be using a Citadel number 2, a small flat Citadel brush. Take a little bit of paint, I load it into my bristles like this, not that much, and I just come in here, and basically what I'm trying to accomplish here is I'm trying to get all this paint worked into these areas here. With the small Citadel brush you have a lot of control, which is great. You can get into all these nooks and crannies. Let me adjust this a little bit so you guys are not completely blocked out. You can see that color change that we're going for here. You just basically take the brush and fill in all these little areas. Moreover, concentrating this color on the sill of the car here, not so much the car body bays. However, I will be putting just a little bit of this on the outer part of the bay when we get to it. But I'm just going in and applying this in all the nooks and crannies of the underbody of this car for now. As I get to the bays, how I'm going to treat these is by putting the wash directly on the sides. I started in first by taking a little bit of the oil and applying it to that very top sill. It can be a little bit hard to coat that, but I'm just loading up my bristles with the paint and I'm brushing it into the bay like this. So I'll spread it around a little bit, try to keep this in shot here, try to keep moving here as well. Once I get the paint spread around, then I can streak it down. At the end of the day, the most important thing here is always making sure that your streaks go straight down like this, like rain streaks. This is how the rust is going to form. There we go. Okay, so that dries very quickly too. Thin wash like that. You can see it's already starting to kind of dry after about 5 minutes. I'm going to let that set up a little bit and then we can start rehandling the car. And I'm going to start doing some detail work on the underbody, like the kick-up spray, that kind of thing. So on these covered hoppers, you get the kick-up lines from the truck, which is where the spray from the wheels gets tossed up on these bays, and it creates these little lines that splatter across. So I want to recreate those with a little bit of black. I'm using again my scruffy looking Citadel brush to do some rough looking kick-up lines. I'm basically doing some dry brushing techniques. I come in here with the brush and I just start painting in some scruffy looking lines. You can see with that brush it makes a rough looking fan pattern, and that's exactly what I want to do this effect. And I'm just concentrating a majority of that at the base and then working up like this. You can vary this quite a bit. Kick-up spray isn't perfect in real life. It's just kind of this scattered mud splatter that eventually accumulates and starts to rust. Go over that little area again. Just like this. There we go. As you can see in the end slope sheet there, I've got all the kick-up spray. I did that with the oil techniques. Doing the splatter with stains, a little bit of acrylic work, and then obviously we have the airbrush work as the base. There's the defined kick-up line, mud splatter, all that good stuff. It's on the underbody, so it's really coming along here, and of course it's the same on the opposite end as well. So we're going to start working on the car body side with acrylic washes. Starting on the car body sides, I'm going to be applying a light wash to the car body here. I'll get this a little bit better adjusted so we can zoom in here. And I'll carefully adjust my camera. Normally I would just blast away through this with a large brush and do the washes. However, I'm doing this with a small brush so I can do some more wavy effects. The car body is made of sheet metal obviously, and a lot of times you'll get these little waves of discoloration on the sides, and I want to try to replicate that. The ends are relatively not so bad on this car. It's more over on the sides here that you'll see this wave technique. As I go down and start applying this paint, I'll take a bigger brush and kind of fan this out, and then on a scrap piece of paper or a paper towel, whichever you have, you can just start taking some of this extra paint off by brushing it like this. This is my technique. Like this. Get some on that graffiti there, down here as well too. And then wash it back up. But it's not too crazy on the sides, as you can tell. It's actually a relatively light wash. But I really wanted to try to recreate that wavy effect, so that's why I'm doing it with the brush, the smaller brush, because I have a little bit more control. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm applying the paint in kind of a scruffy motion. And I'll take the camera off the tripod and we'll zoom in on what we're doing here. Take a look at this here. The effect that we've achieved is it looks like the metal is kind of warped and paint's gathered in the low and high spots and basically the warped car body sides. You get a lot of that discoloration and it kind of forms in patches like this. Using the small brush technique is a great way to achieve this effect. So I'm going to basically repeat this for the entire car body and then repeat it on obviously the other side as well. Moving along, I'm going to be using a combination of a medium Citadel brush and my liner brush to get around the small details on the roof, but I want to basically start applying this wash to the roof. And the first step is to just go along, apply it pretty heavily at first, like this, get it all the corners. Once I do that, I'll take a little bit of water, load it onto my liner brush, this guy, and I can kind of go in here. And where this comes in handy is I can get in all these harder to reach areas, like directly underneath the roof walk. Oops, didn't mean to get all that paint on there. We can clean that up later. And I can just start working that paint underneath the roof walk. Because if you don't get underneath the roof walk, you'll get a bunch of weird shadows, and if you take the car from a side, you can see the clean spots underneath the roof walk, which is very unrealistic, so I want to obviously make sure we get all this covered up here. With the washes finished up on the sides, while I still got all my acrylics out, I'm going to go ahead and finish these wheels up for now. Later on we'll go back and apply some powders and such. This is my standard acrylic mix here. I always use the burnt umber or earth brown mixed with a little bit of black to do the flat earth color on the trucks, and then I use straight burnt umber and I just paint the wheel faces with the liner brush or a Citadel number 2 depending on what wheels. I like to use the Citadel number 2 brush for Athearn wheels, but for the bigger wheels like these, the 36-inch wheels on these covered hoppers, I like to use a liner brush. It does quick work of this, and I'm being careful not to get as much of that paint on the rim as possible. I kind of want to avoid that. We're still going to clean all that area off later on with a Q-tip, but this is just a quick, easy application of paint to the wheels. As you can see, make sure you paint both sides of the wheel as well. It's not just the outer face, but also the inner face. Always cover that up. And then don't forget to do your axles as well with the same color. Okay, with the acrylics pretty much finished up on the car for now, we're going to go ahead and switch to our oils, and this is going to be the majority of the work that we're going to be doing from now on will be oil work. The first thing is I want to work on the rust that's starting to bleed down the sides of the car from the top of the roof. This color is kind of a dark red earth, basically like it's kind of like a raw sienna mixed with a little bit of red. It's a very unusual rust color. Best way I can replicate it here in this particular case is to combine two different oils. In this case I got raw sienna and burnt umber. The burnt umber is going to be providing some of that reddish dark earth tone, and then the raw sienna will provide that brighter rust color. So I'm going to mix these two together, and I'm basically going to kind of dry brush the rust down the side of the car. I'll demonstrate this for you guys. Using these two colors mixed together, I got a scruffy Citadel number 2. It's kind of scruffy on the tip there, you can see that, and I'm going to be using this to randomly apply this oil where I need it to go. So I'm going to be trying to replicate these little patches of rust as carefully as I can, and it's very random the way this rust is coming down. It's just in small little select areas, mainly concentrated around the ribs and things like that. I'm just going very lightly here. This is a very light application of this rust color as it's starting to kind of come down, and I'm just putting this where it is on the prototype. So just small little streaks like that, and you can see why we kept those billboards off. We can do this very easily. If we had those billboards in the way, it would really get in the way and cause some problems for us. So it's nice that we kept those off. Let's go ahead and work on the heavier areas now. Getting over to the open area of the car, there's a lot more of that rust color. So I'm going to be concentrating it really right here. There's a lot more streaking coming down. And then kind of right here at the top, it's pretty heavy buildup. I'm just very, very gently streaking that. Pick up a little bit more paint, and you can see I'm really not putting much pressure on the brush. as I streak it down. I'm keeping the brush strokes very soft here, okay? This is very soft. Alright, now that we got the heavier rust streaking done on the top, what I want to work on is starting to put some of that rust and grime on the base. There's usually a lot of rust that accumulates in areas along the base of the car where a lot of that grime will wash up, and I like to use a relatively light wash of oil kind of going along just really the base sill of this car, and I'm just going to kind of work it up a little bit, trying not to get it on these black patches. I just want to darken these little areas like this. As I go down, I'm just trying to follow this as closely as possible to the prototype photos, just laying it in one little bit at a time. A lot of this gets concentrated too at the base of these ribs, so that's really where you want to concentrate this kind of rust here. You can even work some of it up onto the sides like that, just in small little areas where the prototype dictates. Now that we got the little details on the base of the car done, we can go ahead and start doing the fine streaking and detail work with our old friend, the Atlas number 155 here. Very fine tip brush. It's great for doing this detail work. I can kind of come in here and start doing some of the finer streaking and build up of color. And I'm again just using a little bit of straight burnt umber here. Okay, so this is a very light application, and I'm just doing some very fine detail work where needed. There's some fine streaking here and there, and I'm just being cautious, trying to replicate this and like this, working it into these ribs. There's some heavier rust kind of coming down certain parts of these ribs, like where this billboard is, for example, and I'm just replicating that by putting the heavier layers of paint on. You can do some finer streaking. For example, around this patch here, there's a little bit of rust, so I'm just kind of coming in here, put a little bit over that graffiti as well. Alright, with the sides licked, we can go ahead and start working on, well, obviously the roof. And according to the prototype photos, a lot of this rust doesn't essentially come from the roof itself. The roof itself is not that bad. It's really forming from the weld seams on the top of the car where the sides meet the roof, and I'm concentrating the rust using my liner brush just along this little edge, and I'm using a very delicate touch here, and I'm only adding it where I need it, no more, no less. If I need to, I can work it out a little bit, but I'm just applying this very gently to start, just in the little areas where I need it. Again, with the liner brush, we can go ahead and start working the oil paint into the top corner. Mainly underneath the hatches is where you're going to get a lot of this rust, and the prototype has some pretty significant rust in these areas. It's kind of hard to see in the prototype photos, but I'm just doing this according to the photos with relatively heavy wash of this paint. It's important to make sure when you do this that you try to tuck it in as much as possible. You don't want any shadowing underneath any of these hatches here. So I'm just working the paint in, and then I'm moving on down the side like this. Alright, so we're pretty much finished with the roof now at this point. I went and did a very light wash of that oil work, same application that we did around the hatch there, and I just apply that to the roof to blend everything together and make that nice patchy rust color that we can see. You'll notice too, I cleaned off the roof locks. The prototype has relatively clean roof locks, and I just did a very light wash on the roof lock as well to make it look relatively aged, but you can still see the paint is in relatively good condition. But we do have those areas that we painted where it looks like some of the paint's chipped off, and it's looking really good here. You can see that roof just turned out spectacular. It's really nice. So that looks all pretty much really good now. I'm going to do a couple more things to the sides, finish up the ends here. You can see I started working some of that oil work into the ends now, and I'm just going to do a little bit more work on those and wrap this up. But for the most part, the work is really done here for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and I'm basically going to set this aside. We're going to let this dry for a couple days, matter of fact over the weekend, so I can let all this oil work dry, and then we can come back. Alright guys, so that's a good place to wrap up this video, and the next step will be finishing up the car body for the most part. We might even be able to get it done. We'll see what we can get to. So until next time, thanks for watching guys, take it easy.